Going to take a minute for folks to trickle in, so I'll get my screen share up. Hi, everyone that's joining us. We're just going to give it a minute for everyone to be let in to the webinar. So we'll get started in just a moment. All right, good morning, everyone. I'm going to kind of slowly kick us off to give everyone a chance to get in. But we have a lot to talk about today, so I'd rather just jump right in. So today's webinar, we're going to be talking about the dynamic right-of-way, and specifically highlighting some lessons learned from OMF's Smart Curb Collaborative. So today, just going to pop into the agenda. My name is Angela J. Kenny. I lead communications and engagement for the OMF, who's hosting today's webinar. I'm going to start off with a little bit of context just about the OMF, why we are hosting this webinar, and then I'm going to hand it over to Em Burnett from our team, who heads up our Smart Curb Collaborative program. And then we'll jump into discussion with our amazing speakers. Thank you all for joining us today. And then we're going to end with Q&A from you all. So our speakers today are all project leads on smart grant programs related to curb management. We're joined today by Jacob Sherman from PBOT, Alex Demish from SFMTA, Dylan Freed from Minneapolis, and Sarah Abroff from San Jose. And they are going to be engaging in a really exciting panel discussion. Our big goal with today is to share some insights on their projects, but really overall help share some insights that will help cities set up curb digitization projects, and also think about how to set up those projects with an eye, how to set up pilots with an eye on creating a long-term program. So what are those insights in really crafting a solid and kind of sustainable pilot program related to curb digitization, and also dig into some of those kind of policy objectives that these cities are making headway on through the Smart Grant program. Feel free to ask questions at any time. There's a Q&A feature in Zoom at the bottom of your screen. We'll be doing Q&A from you all at the end. But if there's a chance to address some of those in the interim, we will do so. And then this webinar is being recorded right now, so we will make the recording and other resources available after the event. And next, I'm sorry, my slides are working a little slow today. So just to kick us off with a little bit of context about the OMF, many of you are familiar with our work, but we are a nonprofit organization. Since 2019, we have served as a partnership between public agencies and private companies that are really united and share a common goal of finding solutions to shared transportation challenges. So whether that is in kind of new and emerging mobility or public space management, those are the kinds of issues that we're working on together. As I mentioned, we're a nonprofit organization that convenes these groups and brings together other stakeholders to develop data standards, which I'll share more about in a second, and also create community resources around implementing those data standards and kind of tackling other issues related to digital infrastructure. We are a membership organization. Our members help steer our work, they help support our work, and they participate in our governance. We really believe that when all these groups, when public agencies and tech companies and mobility operators and curb users get together and work together with each other and also with their communities, that we can really do great things and we can promote safety and equity and a better quality of life for people using our public streets and sidewalks. So we steward two main tools. Our global open source standards are, really at the heart of the work that we do. One is called the Mobility Data Specification, or MDS for short. You might hear this mentioned through our conversation. This is a digital tool that helps cities manage transportation in the right-of-way. What it does is it standardizes communication and data sharing between cities and private mobility providers. So, think e-scooters, bike share companies, but also taxis and TNCs, car share, et cetera. And what this does is it allows cities to kind of share and validate policy digitally. So sharing out policies related to those programs in a digital computer readable format, and then also getting information back about how those services are operating. So this really allows cities to kind of ensure better outcomes for residents, and also allows the mobility service providers a framework that they can reuse in new markets, as this is a global standard. The curb data specification, which you definitely will hear mentioned today, CDS for short. This is a digital tool that helps cities and companies pilot dynamic curb zones. So similar to MDS, CDS provides this digital mechanism for expressing both static and dynamic regulations, so coding the curb, and measuring activity at the curb, and then ultimately developing policies that create more accessible, useful, and dynamic curb spaces that are kind of responsive to community needs and serve public policy goals. So if you want to learn more about CDS, we're going to share some resources with you throughout the webinar to kind of, whether you're kind of 101 or looking to dig a little bit deeper, we have many of those resources available and we're happy to share them with you. But we won't get too far into the technical. This is really a more high-level conversation. One of the things that makes the tools that we build unique is that they're free to use and built in an open source environment. So that means that public agencies, mobility providers, curb users, name the organization, worldwide can adopt, implement, and continue to develop the specifications. So this is, we're co-creating a common language here for sharing information about what's happening in the public right-of-way. So in addition to the spec work, we're always looking for ways to help cities improve their digital infrastructure, work together, and implement tools like CDS to meet their public policy goals. So in addition to stewarding MDS and CDS, the Smart Curb Collaborative is one of our key programs. So I'm going to hand it over to Em now to talk about the collaborative.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm Em Burnett. I'm the program manager for the Smart Curb Collaborative. If you're not familiar, the collaborative is a group of 10 cities who all received US DOT SMART grants. And these cities are all using CDS, which Angela just mentioned, to do a variety of projects. They're all a little similar and all a little unique. Some of the examples, they're piloting zero emission delivery zones, creating digital commercial vehicle permits, communicating real-time curb use information, inventorying objects at the curb, and even more than that. They all are learning from each other in this model. We host events together, we host monthly, bi-monthly meetings so that the collaborative can learn from one another. And we're starting to share resources with the community. So in keeping with our open source practice and values, the collaborative is producing both blog posts as well as white papers, guides for any city or interested person or entity that wants to learn about digitizing your curb and the dynamic right-of-way. So We have a new website just launched that contains a lot of resources. All of these webinars are also linked there. I'll share the link to that in a moment. That's really exciting, but we would encourage you to check out the resources there and also let us know if they're helpful, especially if you're considering working on a curb project in your city. One more slide. We're already halfway through this pilot collaborative, and it is a little bit hard to believe, but we released a report just this week, and this mid-grant summary report, while maybe not sounding the most interesting, it actually is a great read. It contains a lot of information and early learnings from the city's key themes. So again, if you're either working on curb technology, working in a city, or even just an academic researcher wanting to learn about what these cities are confronting, we have all of these themes that are covered in the report and more about the program and what these cities have learned. And that is also going to frame today's discussion, kind of bringing this report to light. So I'm going to send you 3 links in just a moment, and we'll also have that in any follow-up materials. But all of these are great things to check out if you're interested in the Curb Collaborative.
Thanks, Em. All right, I'm going to jump into the panel, but I just, one last thing that I wanted to share with you all is that we're having this discussion today. We're also having a curb data specification working group meeting in 2 weeks. These are open to the public. I will talk about this at the end before we wrap up, but I want to invite everyone to attend that meeting. We're going to be talking, like kind of double clicking on the learnings of this group as they relate to the curb data specification and talking about future developing the next version of the specification. So this is particularly interesting, I think, on a technical level, but also, you know, for anyone attending today, this will be a great kind of next step. Yeah, we'll share a little bit more, but you're invited, and I hope to see everyone there. So I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share, and we're going to dive into the discussion. Let me just get the right things open on my screen. But I'm going to, we're going to start off with each of our panelists, telling us a little bit more about your project, like what's the high level couple sentences, and also your role in the project. So I'm going to hand it over. Let's start with Sarah.
Great. Thank you so much, Angela. Hi, everyone. I am Sarah Abraw from City of San Jose. I will try to make this as concise as possible, but our project consists of 2 very basic elements. One is taking inventory of our curbs in downtown to actually know what the colors of the curb are and the regulations associated there. And then the other half is to monitor activity on those curbs to see how the curbs are actually being used, where people aren't parking, where there are conflicts, where there's double parking, all of that kind of stuff. You know, I keep saying that it boils down to these 2 things, but our long-term goals are about making our curbs safer, you know, we have very ambitious climate goals, and we want to increase accessibility. And before we can get to those long off goals, we kind of have to lay the groundwork and do the basics of collecting the data that we are collecting for our study. And my role on the project is I am a co-project lead. I work at the Department of Transportation in the planning department. And this project is being led by planning as well as parking, which is really exciting. We're doing this together, and I am on the planning team. So that is our project in a nutshell.
Thanks, Sarah. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Jacob.
Thanks, Angela. Hi, everyone. Jacob Sherman from the Portland Bureau of Transportation. use he, him pronouns. I manage our new mobility and electrification team. So we work on kind of mobility innovation topics that span things from e-scooters to automated vehicles, regulatory policy to mobility data, and EV charging to zero emission delivery. I'm kind of working with our team, and huge shout out to Sarah Pullman on my staff, who's leading a lot of the day-to-day work on our zero emission delivery zone pilot project. And our SMART grant is really focused on using advanced technologies and data to test out the nation's first regulated zero emission delivery zone. We're really exploring kind of whether and how curb management and advanced technologies can be effective tools to advance climate action at the local level. And what this really looks like is we are temporarily repurposing 5 truck loading zones in downtown Portland, completing a curb inventory of the city, and installing sensors at these 5 loading zones that are going to be for zero emission delivery vehicles only for a 6-month period, using sensors to monitor use. And then we're also working on, we've actually already executed what we believe is the first known data integration between a logistics company and a city using the mobility data specification. So there's a lot of really exciting kind of advanced technology deployment that we're doing. And again, you know, I think like Sarah, we're really hoping that we can determine whether and how some of these tools, as well as curb management, can be effective strategies on climate action. Thanks.
Cool. All right, Dylan, passing it over to you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dylan Freed. I'm with the Minneapolis Public Works Department. The position I'm in here manages our mobility and curbside management program. So the title of our SMART Grant project is called an Open Data Approach to Curbside Management. We have a lot of things in common with what Sarah's doing over there in San Jose. One of the primary pillars of our project is creating a digital inventory of our the curb space in our project area. We have about a mile-long section of Nicollet Avenue in South Minneapolis called Eat Street locally. It's a popular multicultural and dining destination, all kinds of small businesses along the corridor. So we're creating a digital curb map of that space, doing an exercise in data integration from different systems like our asset management system, parking management system, enforcement systems. So doing this systems integration exercise to ultimately produce and populate the different API fields that are within the curb data specification. So once we create the digital curb map, we're also using advanced sensor technology to both gain historical information and to ultimately, the shiny things, long-term goal would be to provide live time information to help improve the e-commerce deliveries. And so that's kind of our project in a nutshell. There's a large component of stakeholder engagement as well to help us as we get data about how the curb is being used. We kind of want to cross-reference that and talking to the users on the corridor to make sure we're seeing what we think we're seeing with the data. So.
Thanks. All right, Alex, tell us about your program.
All right, last but not least, so San Francisco's project is all focused on the curb inventory piece. So describing it as a 3-legged stool. There's creating the inventory, there's keeping it up to date, and then making use of it. So in this project, we're not doing anything on the demand side. It's all on the supply. And all 3 of those pieces are hard, but I think a key point is the maintenance. Like building a curb citywide curb data set is not easy, but like once it's created, like it's also immediately out of date because there's all these changes happening, you know, on a daily, monthly basis. And yet at the same time, it's like our agency is theoretically the best organization positioned to keep track of those changes because all of it goes through us. So we are focused on trying to keep that data set up to date. And this is, you know, our project area is the entire city of San Francisco. So it's a lot of changes, it's a lot of space. But we want to kind of, we can crack this nut of how to keep the data up to date, like it'll start off as a manual process, but we are aiming to do a lot more, have it a lot more automated through systems and data integration. That then sets the foundation for like actually digitally managing the curb. So we are working with INRIX on this project, and they have some existing curb data, which is a great starting point for us. So that's allowing us to, we need to refine that data set, but also gives us more time to focus on the maintenance and actually making use of that data. And I'm leading the project. I lead a small data and analytics team at SFMTA, but working closely with lots of other groups within the agency. So namely our parking and curb management team, our IT group, a lot of planners and engineers like work on like streetscape transit projects, see how they can make use of the data to inform their projects and make them more efficient, as well as our shop staff who actually make the changes on the street.
Cool. Oh my gosh, so much in here. So one of the things though, before we move on to like some of the key themes that your projects have and some key themes of the learning so far, I really want to put like a super fine point on this. There's coding the curb is an element of all of these projects, some to a greater extent than others. But what does that really have to do with like creating more dynamic public space? Like, can you kind of maybe one or two of you put a really fine point on what that looks like on the ground as a real example? Jacob, I see you nodding your head. Go
Sure,
for
yeah.
it.
I mean, maybe just to jump in real fast. I mean, we found within our kind of core project area that commercial truck loading zones are used improperly approximately 75% of the time. So when a UPS or Amazon driver pulls up to try and make their delivery, 3 times out of 4, someone else is parked there and they can't do that. So they've got to circle the block, drive a few more blocks in order to find space. And so I think in many ways, one thing we're trying to do is we're trying to kind of increase access so that in some ways industry can operate more efficiently. But then you also decrease vehicle miles traveled, you improve safety through the process. And there's also kind of positive climate benefits at the exact same time. So that might sound like a pretty wonky thing, but I think if we can in many ways kind of increase the efficiency of the curb in certain areas and use data and advanced technologies to help us do that, I think that's a win-win-win.
For sure.
I'd love
Thank
to
you.
add something to
Yeah.
that.
Go for it.
I just think I agree with everything that Jacob said. And going back to what Alex mentioned about taking the inventory being this sort of like basic baseline, that is also what we're doing in San Jose in the downtown is we're taking the inventory and coding the curb throughout downtown. And for us, it's like that is just the basic first step that we need to do anything else. So I'm on the planning team. We're always coming up with great ideas of, oh, let's change this. Let's, pilot this. Why don't we, there's this and that. And unless we actually know what's at the curb, there's no way to actually analyze it. There's no way to actually know how to change it. So for us, it's like this coding of the curb, knowing what's there, gaining control as a city over what's out on our streets. That's what we need to do before we do anything else.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so there are several cities I think represented as attendees on this call who are struggling with, or who are dealing with similar challenges and who often are, trying to create projects or get pilots off the ground of their own. So I want to start a little bit with the kind of like lessons learned from planning. And so how did you each decide what you wanted to actually do with the projects, what you wanted to accomplish? And then how did that impact your approach? Like what kind of structural changes did you need to have in mind or make so that you can make sure that you meet your goals? And I'll start with like either Alex or Dylan here.
I could start. We've been wanting to do like a lot of this for a long time. I mean, this has been like in our agency as a curb management strategy. This was noted as like having a digital curb inventory has been noted as a key point. It's part of our strategic plan. And it just gets to that, like you can't manage what you can't measure, and it's and it's a pain point because, you know, we get asked by like the public and even our own staff are asking like, where are all the loading zones or where are all the accessible parking zones? And, you know, that's always a hard question to answer. And a lot of people are surprised that maybe we don't have all that stuff in a one-stop shop, but we don't. And like no city does. And it's a pain point for all of us. So yeah, building off what Sarah said too, like this is that foundation, and we know that we need this in order to do other, you know, cool and exciting things. So I think that has helped kind of shape the priority of this, and also for us, it's also kind of look around like, okay, what are ways to keep this data up to date, and just like somewhat coincidentally, our agency's been implementing this asset management system, and you know, that presents some opportunities where people are keeping track of like curb paint that is being put on the street or signs that are being installed, and like there's a link there between regulations and assets. So it kind of just like these things are like in front of us already, like, oh, maybe there's something there, maybe we can pull that stuff together. And like certainly other cities have asset management systems and are looking to solve these problems. So yeah, we're hoping we can solve it for ourselves and, you know, help advance something for everyone too.
Sure. So in Minneapolis, we passed our most recent updated comp plan, I think in 2018. And then in 2020, we had a subsequent document to that, our transportation action plan that laid out a number of initiatives with a 10-year scope related to transportation. In our street operations section, there was a number of elements around curbside management that we wanted to do to modernize the system, improve curbside operations. And so we looked a lot to that to match up those goals with what we laid out in our SMART grant. We also had a very active, our mobility team, as we became familiar and fluent with MDS, mobility data specification with scooters, and working with our IT department, we kind of gained a pretty deep insight in what was possible with data specification. So we kind of married those two together and combining to what this project was ultimately going to be. And so that is kind of how we kind of laid out the initial scope. Now, as far as advice to other cities, like I think it's been a benefit to our city that our geographical area of our project is relatively small. So if you bite off too much more than you can chew, it can get a little overwhelming. So that's helped in a lot of ways. But as far as, you know, what structural changes to our organization do we need to realize to realize our project? You know, Alex has talked about this, Sarah has talked about this. As soon as you map the curb, that's out of date on day 2 if you don't have an ongoing plan for maintenance of that data. And so that's something we're really trying to work through and internalize and understand what that means. When I was discussing this project early on with our IT department, they referenced that our water division has an army of 8 GIS technicians that they send out to monitor and map all of their water infrastructure in GIS format. And so I'm going, boy, how many GIS techs am I going to need to keep my curb data up to date? Or what other resources am I going to need to keep this data up to date? So those are kind of some of the long-term things we're starting to think about as far as where does this project go once the SMART grant portion of it runs out. So
Jacob and Sarah, what are some of those structural changes that you've maybe already made or are, you know, thinking about? I know that you have some tips too.
Yeah, I'm happy to go. So I mentioned during the intro that this is actually a joint project between the planning team and the parking team. And on parking, that's led by Elias Curry, and his team had actually already been taking manual inventory. So they had a little step ahead. This has been always a really big priority for him. And then coming from the planning side, we had recently published our downtown transportation plan, which listed curb management as one of the key things that we needed to do. So when we decided to apply to this grant, we kind of brought those two things together. And this is pretty unique for our two departments to work in this way. We know each other, but it's quite siloed. Like the parking team is really dealing with on the ground, everyday parking and curb issues. Planning team is thinking long-term. So we came together and we decided on this inventory and a little bit of a curb utilization to be our project. But when we're thinking about structural changes, it's interesting because just the fact that this is the first time we've really ever worked together in this way, we're already sort of forming some structure changes. And it's really awesome to be able to partner like this and to bring teams together within the DOT. I think we're kind of figuring out what the long term is going to look like. But right now, we're having to think about the kind of like the technology and the day-to-day and how this goes together with the long term. And there's just this bringing it together that I think is what the next step for our department is, and how we can also, we're hoping to learn from this and come up with a new structure or a new way of thinking that we can also apply, I think, to other projects, because it's working so well here. I don't know if that fully gets to your question. It's a work in progress, but it's like this very encouraging, unique thing that we're working through now.
Oh, well, and maybe I'll pick up there because it's really interesting just hearing kind of what Sarah is saying about building kind of cross-functional collaboration kind of within the agency. I think we work kind of in the planning policy space, and my team kind of specifically, we managed our scooter program early on. And I think one of the muscles that we developed through that process was cross-functional collaboration across the entire organization. And so in many ways here with this project, I think we're just kind of doing some more reps of those muscles. And I think it's really exciting how we are, on a pretty regular basis working with transportation operations, working with parking enforcement, working with the data GIS kind of side of the house, working across city bureaus with our smart cities team, who has an expertise in kind of surveillance and privacy topics. And so it's been really interesting. It hasn't necessarily been a change there, but I think it helps kind of reinforce some of a broader kind of one city approach to collaboration. I think we really relied on kind of existing policy as some of the genesis of our project, our climate emergency work plan, our 2040 freight plan. We had some things in place to provide some guidance. We're really trying to figure out how technology can be in service to our broader policy goals. And I think one thing, again, not a change, but more a reinforcement that we've done kind of with our project, is we decided really early on to work with the private sector on the technology side of things. So we're working with INRIX and Automotus and Clever City. We didn't want to build internal kind of bespoke tools that might be A, hard to maintain, or B, really hard to get the private sector to use. The private sector can sometimes be skeptical of city-built tools and systems. And so, I think we're excited because I think some of the private sector partnerships that we have in place, I think are already helping kind of some of the data and technology scale and be adopted.
Yeah. One of the learnings that we've really noticed or observed across all of the collaborative cities is really that this like cross department working together, kind of taking a whole city approach, that's like really key to making this happen, especially on the timeline of the SMART grants. So I want to kind of like shift gears a little bit and talk about, these are goals that your cities have had for a long time. And the SMART grants really unlocked funding to make it happen, but also the SMART grants are really unique in that they're a really tight timeline. And also, the fact that these awards have gone to cities is somewhat unique just in the federal grant making world. So can you, I guess, the question that I have is that 18 months that's the initial project period is 18 months. It's a very tight timeline. And I think any organization would really struggle to get anything done in that amount of time, right? Like even some of the most innovative companies would struggle with that, but we're seeing cities deliver, right? We're halfway through and you have learnings, you're in it. So can you share a little bit more about kind of like, in addition to this collaboration element within your cities, what are some other ways that you're really able to deliver on such a tight timeline? And maybe what's the role of the SMART grants in that? Because there's something special about this program or your team or all of the above.
Well, I'll jump on that. So
Yeah.
no one else came off mute first. So, I think there is something really special there. And I think kudos to the US Department of Transportation. I think they like set a high and achievable bar kind of all at once, really kind of like catalyzing the need for action and really kind of, I think, encouraging agencies to spur innovation. And they also kind of created, I think, a little bit of a sandbox where there's some controlled room for failure. You can even look through some of the materials and it talks about testing out strategies that may not prove successful. I think generally as, stewards of taxpayer resources at the local level, we're very considerate about wanting to like build the perfect cathedral, get everything organized and have it roll out without any issues. And I think, here there's an old architecture article about building the cathedral or the bazaar. I think this is more of the bazaar approach where things can self-organize, they can move fast. And you have some things pay off and some things might not pay off. And I think it's been really exciting. I think the ambitious timeline, here at our agency, we really set out to kind of deliver as much as we could within 9 months because we wanted to set ourselves up for a stage 2 grant application. And I think at times that was exceptionally intense. But as you said, we've delivered a lot. And again, huge shout out to my colleague Sarah Pullman, but built a MDS integration between a logistics company and the city, installed a bunch of sensors, purchased an EV truck for our own city. We've got a bunch of partnerships kind of cooking. And I think in many ways, and I feel like I've seen it throughout the collaborative, DOT set a high bar and we all kind of rose to the occasion and appreciate, I think, through our kind of collaborative, the opportunity to connect with other cities and do some troubleshooting, to talk peer to peer and say, here's what I'm trying to tackle, or do you have this contact at that organization? I'm trying to get in touch with them. I think that this is also for us maybe been a little bit of the special sauce, being able to connect as peers to troubleshoot and advance the work.
Yeah, I'll jump in. It is real unique that this program within the US DOT, right? It is with their Office of Research Research and Research and Innovation, rather than, it's not an FDA program, it's not a FHWA program, which come with a lot of like baggage in reporting and standards and processes. So there's been a lot of room to do things different and to try out, and whether it's room to fail or room to learn. That's one of the things I think we've appreciated the most is the focus of this program on building the internal capacity within cities and other jurisdictions that receive the SMART grants to be fluent in smart city initiatives. So it's like, sure, maybe we wanted to provide like whiz-bang curb management solutions as one of the top goals of our thing, but we've learned so much about what it takes to both record and then provide ongoing management and updating of information, and how to scope solicitations, and how the different parts fit together with using a data specification. And the SMART Grant program has really given us space to do that and to pivot where we needed to when things weren't going to quite work out maybe exactly as planned with the original scope, but we're still internalizing a lot of these learnings to raise the bar for all of our staff. And I think some cities, other cities have a similar experience. So.
Yeah, I'd love to add to that. Agree, of course, with Dylan and Jacob on everything they said. But, you know, I think a really big incentive for us was the amount of money that we could apply for this kind of project was really unique for stage one. And that we knew right from the get-go that there would be this stage two with a bigger pot that we could apply for. Like, it just energized everyone on our team to get on board, to apply, to put everything forward. And you know, I have to say, like, we saw these timelines and we were like, this is impossible. And yet we've done them. We've met every deadline. You know, a bunch of us cities have applied to stage two when that felt impossible. So I think just sort of the mix of the amount of money, the timeline, the freedom to test, it has all just kind of come together to be really fruitful for the cities. And then I want to say another key reason why San Jose has been able to get it together and like stay on task and keep moving forward is because we have so much support from senior leadership within the DOT on like senior leadership across different teams in the department. And this is a really high priority project. And that has allowed us, when there's been kind of like hurdles or barriers or roadblocks, that we can elevate this and figure out ways to get things expedited, figure out a path forward. It's because this is a high priority project for San Jose, and we want to make it move forward, and we have the support on our side at the city to do that.
Yeah, something that you said, you know, about the alignment of senior leadership. I think it's really easy to have alignment when there's something big, bad in front of you that you need to respond to, right? We see that across any type of organization. I'm not just talking about cities. But something that has been really inspiring to me about these projects is that there's alignment around something that is more proactive, more entrepreneurial in nature, in that it is solving a problem that has long been accepted as like a problem that just is going to be there forever, right? One of these kind of big structural problems, not the big bad in front of everyone, but one of those kind of long-term structural issues that many people kind of throw up their hands and say, oh, well, there's not much you can do about this. So that's what's been really exciting to me to observe, again, throughout these projects, is the alignment around something that is, you know, somewhat proactive, but also just one of these, I don't know, like a kind of bigger structural issue. As my like just falls off my computer. So Alex, any kind of final thoughts on that before I ask you all the last question and we move to audience Q&A?
Yeah, I mean, there's just certainly some like necessity, like it's ingenuity to it. Like, you know, once we had these grants, I know we all have like collaborated on like just getting through the procurement pieces. But I remember, kudos to SFMTA's procurement team when I sat down with them and just shared the timeline. It's just like, oh man, like, okay, the shortest possible, like, you know, theoretical is like 9 months. And, you know, like lo and behold, like we did it in 9 months. And that was, yeah, I mean, certainly a lot of ups and downs there. But also just like kudos to the collaborative. I mean, SFMTA didn't end up using this, but the development of the collaborative procurement model and using Sourcewell to create this set of contracts like for the collaborative, and now anyone to use, where there's a lot of just basic curb management technology vendors that you can just go use now. Like that's an awesome, like lasting, like very strong lesson learned and resource just for all of us to benefit from.
Yeah. Oh, procurement. We could have a whole webinar about it. But I don't know if it's a frustrating topic. That's for sure. So I just want to invite all of our participants now to ask questions in the Q&A. I'll ask a final question to you all, and then we'll open up the floor. So if anyone who's listening in has a burning question for our panelists, drop it in the chat. But I think like I guess on a closing note, why is it important for cities in particular to have opportunities like this? And in other words, how are cities uniquely positioned to deliver on change for our communities? Why you? We're biased.
I could
But-
jump in. Yes, I know. I think one of the things is, you know, I just can't imagine sort of anybody else doing this, but City of San Jose, like we manage our streets and our curbs, but we're so connected with the community as well. And a big piece of what I didn't mention in what we're doing, you know, I mentioned we're taking inventory of the curb and we're doing the monitoring curb. We also have a huge community engagement piece to this. And the whole point is to make things safer, better, more accessible for our community. And I don't see other agencies, you know, at this sort of like local level to be able to have the connection to residents and to be able to bring it into this project and to incorporate all those findings to improve on the curb. And that's just key to what we're doing here.
Yes, that is another common theme that we've seen throughout. And there's also a resource on our resource hub, by the way, about community engagement. So for those of you who are listening in, who are embarking on your kind of community engagement component to a curb pilot, check that out. But I'm sure that there are other insights on that and also kind of the bigger question. Dylan,
Yeah,
you're
so
unmuted.
So yeah, why is it important for cities to have opportunities like this? You know, it's a little bit of a broken record, but building that internal capacity around technical smart city things has been really important for us, and kind of helps us put a little bit more of a roadmap forward. And I totally second what Sarah was saying. Our community engagement has been one of the most important, amazing parts of this project, because we're both talking to the shop owners, the people block by block in our project area about what their needs are. But we've actually made quite a bit of progress in talking with like regional and large national carriers, like the likes of C.H. Robinson and FedEx and UPS. Like they've been willing to sit down at the table and talk with us about like the tit for tat, like what are the logistics of routing and making deliveries in this neighborhood. So we're positioned in a way that maybe some larger governmental entities aren't, to have a little bit more of that direct interaction with them. However, part of what's been good about the collaborative approach that we're doing is, you know, the collective weight of different cities all having a similar approach to trying to do a better job of digitally managing their space, you know, creates kind of a critical mass to try to hopefully bring some of these other providers to the table as well. So it's kind of like we all need to be working in concert with each other. It's I don't know that this US DOT could dictate from on high that all the carriers are going to use curb data specification, but if all the cities become fluent in that and we start working with the carriers, you know, can create that momentum towards better digital curb management.
I was just going to say real fast, +1 to what Sarah and Dylan both said in many regards. I think one other thing is just like the direct funding to cities is super unique and super beneficial. I will say it also adds some complications if you haven't received direct funding awards before. And so for anyone kind of pursuing that, I'd say go talk to your grant management staff and your finance team early and often, so that you can just, you know, kind of manage that change process internally. But I think it's been exceptionally beneficial to have it as a direct award because of some of the innovation things that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, it's a great opportunity for US DOT to invest in cities, like the long-term, like organizational capacity. Like we all, I mean, in terms of like the curb space, like cities are the ones that like make the regulations, that have the connections to the communities, and are literally responsible for their own city. But the cities throughout the collaborative, we're learning like every city kind of varies in their ability or maybe existing capabilities, but these opportunities create the ability to kind of for cities to grow themselves so they can handle, you know, the next one more easily.
Yeah. And this isn't the first time I think that you've seen, you know, cities band together and adopt standards and adopt standard approaches to things. So this is there's a kind of precedent for this. I'm going to, so we're going to open it up to questions from the audience. I mean, I could keep asking you questions, as you know. But I'm looking in the chat right now, and there's also one in Q&A that Jacob is typing an answer to. So we'll start with the chat. Andrew asks, this is a question for Sarah. I think some of you might also have insights on how you got leadership alignment to occur. Like, was there a kind of design or did everyone kind of rally around it? So for those of you who are working across multiple divisions, how'd you do it?
I think
What are your
there's
tips?
been, you know, we didn't go into this like we're all a united front and all thinking this is the most important thing for the DOT. But I think, you know, for certain groups, this is super important, and for others, it's important, maybe less so. And I think as we've worked through the grant, we've had a lot of conversations that have helped encourage each other and show each other the importance of this and the benefits to the department overall, and, you know, to meeting our goals long term. So I think it's kind of been a work in progress. But there haven't been major hurdles in getting everybody together and aligned on this. But we didn't start out just like fully aligned. It's been part of the process.
Is that a similar kind of sentiment for you all?
I'd say somewhat. You know, one thing we did early on was actually created 2 cross bureau and had some other sister bureaus, like working groups. So we actually had a technology kind of working group that was helping inform sensor selection, wide variety of internal and then again sister bureau stakeholders. And then we had, as we were identifying loading zones and loading zone policy and things like that, we had another working group. I believe that one was maybe entirely internal. And we worked through kind of on a parallel process with both of those working groups, a bunch of the sets of questions that we had. And, you know, we actually chartered those working groups, created a charter document outlining how we make decisions as an organization. I think some of those things were really helpful because in many ways they also kind of then trickled up into the organization kind of at higher kind of management and leadership levels. So I think those are maybe some kind of concrete examples for us.
Yeah, we did a charter as well, and so it was a little bit of both, where there was, I think, some at the like executive level, people acknowledged that this was something that was important, but like how exactly we were going to make this happen was unclear. But a charter was a helpful tool. You know, we mentioned we had this asset management system project and our digital curb inventory project. We have an IT project manager, and it's the same person for both. And like he's able, once we were able to see like, oh, this would be a valuable way, you know, to set this up organizationally. Like he's now able to connect the dots in ways that like no one else can see things. So yeah, a little kind of top down and bottom up.
Yeah, for us, it really helped that our project was aligned with the transportation action plan, as I said earlier, because we could point to a number of things in that plan that we said we were going to do 4 years ago that, look, we're doing them now. So that's really helped with kind of aligning what we're doing with leadership. I absolutely, you know, when I've updated our public works director, I get a little bit of a, you're doing what from time to time, because it is really difficult to communicate about some of the wonky items. And that's something we're kind of learning through our stakeholder engagement, is to really take a step back and talk about the broader goals and like cool it on getting into the wonky data specification stuff, at least for some of those initial conversations, till you kind of build that baseline understanding of what your broader goals are. So
Yes. This is a huge learning for us as an organization too. Like, you know, we build data standards, it's wonky. And so finding ways to kind of bring that work to life, like make it easily understandable, is really important for us. There's so many benefits to this, but it's also not, yeah, it's not like part of the kind of common knowledge for most people. It certainly wasn't for me. I was like, what the heck is this? I didn't know what a data standard was until it kind of came in contact with my day-to-day work. And so, yeah, I think we have a long way to go on that front, but I think you all are also kind of developing learnings around that, like how and when to to teach people about this specific element. And I know, just looking at the attendee list, this is something that many cities deal with, but also vendors. There are plenty of vendors that really understand the power of a data standard and struggle to communicate that to cities as well. Or the curb users. So I think, yeah, it's a persistent challenge and one I think that I'm excited to kind of learn a little bit more about through this program. I want to, there's another really interesting question in chat, and unfortunately, I think it's going to be the last one that we'll have time for. But Lauren is asking, for those working a lot with carriers, what has helped getting those companies on board so far? So this is like kind of related to this discussion. What has worked well for you thus far, and what advice do you have? And maybe there is, I can at least kick us off by saying, I think the collaborative approach, I think, is a benefit, right? When we're talking about at least the role of a data standard, there's a lot there. That's an attractive thing for some carriers, right? Because they're not just operating in one city, they're operating in many. But yeah, give us some insights on working with carriers.
Our side, it's still a little early, but we've been talking with industry and saying like, hey, we're doing this curb inventory project. We see ways this could be helpful for you. Like, do you find this helpful? The answer is yes, but also I think some of us like learning like there are other pain points. Like some of them are getting a lot of tickets already, or others are interested in other areas of like temporary street closures, which is getting us more motivated to make more investments in that area. So just kind of a little bit of understanding of like how it affects their operations and like what else beyond what it is we're doing like right now, and what else can we do, in parallel or later that can help.
Yeah, I think for us, one of the keys has been similar, like I just said with our engagement, is keeping it general at first, right? A lot of these carriers, if I come in as a government agency and say, hey, you need to hook into this data stream to get information from us, they're going to be like guard up right away. But if we come into the conversation and say, hey, we know there's a problem, if not a problem, at least areas for improvement with logistics of delivery operations, what are your pain points? And we come in listening and expressing our openness and flexibility to make changes to improve things, and just asking questions about how their logistics work and like opportunities for us to work together has been really helpful in our approach. Again, just kind of taking a step back, looking at what the bigger picture is, rather than having a solution in search of a problem with digital tools. So
just building on that, I agree with what Dylan's saying, is like trying to solve problems. So again, 75% of the time loading zones are used improperly, and we're trying to fix that through our project. And through our project, we also know that a number, especially of the large carriers, have bold climate commitments to decarbonize in 2035, 2040, 2050. And we're saying this could be a showcase for innovation here in Portland. You want to take some electric vehicles and deploy them here, and we can help celebrate that. So I think really kind of thinking about where they sit and what they're experiencing, and how our projects can be kind of platforms for success for them, as Dylan was saying, is really important.
Yes, aligning on shared values, so important for all aspects of projects like this, working with all the stakeholders, whether that's internally or externally. Okay, thank you all so much for joining us. We will, in 2 weeks, We're having a working group meeting where we will talk more about specifically some of the technical learnings, the learnings as they relate to data governance, and data analysis and things of that nature. So I welcome everyone to join us. It's also on a Tuesday, so same bat time, same bat channel. And also check out our resource hub that Em linked. There's the Midway report and several other resources from the collaborative. So I just want to thank all of our speakers again. Thank you, Jacob, Alex, Sarah, Dylan, and thank you for your work on these projects. You're really, you're not only improving your own communities, but it's just awesome to see you share these learnings with other cities who are working on similar projects. So with that, everyone have a great rest of your day, and we will send along the recording and the resources that we talked about. So thank you all.